And it gives me a great pleasure to thank our next speaker as a supporter of DLD. HP Hewlett-Packard became a partner of DLD, and we are very proud to have with us today the Vice President and the Chief Disruptive Global Head of Hewlett-Packard Tech Venture. Please help me welcome Andrew Bolwell. Bolwell, right? Bolwell, right?
Very good.
Even
I can't pronounce it, so that's excellent.
Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you for having me. And nice to be here, everybody. Do I have my slides? There we go. Technology is working here. So what I want to do today is talk a little bit about the future. And I think when you think about the future, you have to be thinking about change. Now, I'm probably dating myself here a little bit, but when I was at school, we had computers that would fill up this room. I don't know if anyone here remembers that as well. We now have smartphones in our pockets that have more power and more compute power than all of NASA had in 1969 to put the first man on the moon. And in fact, I think that change is, there's just so much change happening around us that I think we forget how fast things are changing today as well. I mean, we're living in a world, as we just heard. All right, no, it's all right. But then I have to start again. I think they're nearly out now. Thank you for saying so. So I was saying about change, how there's so much change that we forget how fast things are changing. We just heard a panel on mobile payments. We're living in a world now of self-driving cars and maybe soon self-flying cars. We're living in a world where India can put a spacecraft around Mars for less than what Hollywood spent making the movie Gravity. In Africa, 93% of people use a mobile phone and only 65% have access to the electricity needed to charge them. We're living on the verge of designer babies, and scientists could bring the woolly mammoth back from extinction. And tables still live in the physical world and get in the way here. So a very fast-paced, changing world here, and I think that the rate of this change in innovation is happening exponentially, right? Time to market shrinking, these new ideas, products and services being adopted faster and faster, quickly changing our lives. I mean, it took the telephone 75 years to reach 50 million people, and it took Angry Birds just 35 days. Huh? But you know what? When we look back, and I think we all would experience this, that all of this innovation that's happening, we soon take it all for granted. You know, it quickly changes our lives, how we live, how we work. And then it's harder and harder to remember what life was like before these innovations came into the world. A few I remember growing up. If you wanted to call home, you found a payphone, and typically you called collect. Now you can text anybody, anywhere, anywhere in the world, anytime you like. I remember heating up stuff in the oven. Now, of course, we just zap it in a microwave oven. I remember taking my kids to the library every weekend. I don't know how many people do that anymore. We can now just pretty much download whatever content we need and want to our mobile devices anytime we like. And I remember my mum bought a colour TV in 1977 just so we could watch Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory in colour. And now you can watch pretty much any movie you want, anytime you want, on any device you want, whenever you want. Sometimes it's hard to remember that all of these innovations have changed our lives. And when we look into the future as well, how might the innovations happening around us today change how we live and work in the future too? Think about those rites of passage that we go through in life, those milestones that we reflect on and remember at some point. How might they change in the future because of the technology happening today? So maybe you remember your first dog, your first pet. Maybe in the future now you're going to be remembering your first robot instead. Or your first girlfriend, or your first boyfriend. Maybe in the future you'll be remembering your first AI crush. Hey, I remember my first car. Who here remembers their first car? Hey, maybe one day soon our kids or grandkids will be remembering their first flying car. Or that first time you took a plane trip somewhere was just exhilarating as a kid. Maybe in the future we'll remember our first space flight. I remember my first paycheck. I still value each and every one I get. But maybe in the future we'll all remember our first Bitcoin deposit. Maybe we've already experienced that already. Everyone, I hope, remembers their first child, right? Maybe in the future we'll think about our first designer baby. And if we're all lucky enough to celebrate an 80th birthday with people that we love, or even get to that age and reflect back on that milestone, at some point, maybe in just 100 years, we'll all be remembering our 180th birthday, hopefully very fondly. All of these things could happen, and these are the things that we might think about in the future as well. So the question for all of us, I think, as we go through these transitions in business as individuals is, how do we deal with all of this change? How do we stay ahead of this change? How do we lead this change instead of being led by it? We recognize these opportunities early on so we can take advantage of them. So I think it's pretty clear. There's a lot of people here talking about the future. I would just say that you cannot predict the future. It just can't be done. We all might like to think we can do it well, but at least 50% of the time we're wrong. But what we can do is we can look to megatrends to help point the way. And for me, this doesn't mean a focus on technology. It means a focus on people, on the human experience. How will human experiences change over time? And then you can step back and you can look at these megatrends. And I don't mean just technology trends here. I mean socioeconomic, demographic, obviously technological trends. How are they going to shape our human experiences in the future? The panel earlier just talked about how they'll shape how we pay for things in the future. But they'll shape how we buy things in the future, how we work, how we transport ourselves around the world, how we educate ourselves, how we stay healthy. These are the things that I think megatrends can really point to. So I want to share 4 megatrends that I think are especially important, that we pay close attention to, and then just talk briefly about how these megatrends are shaping the world around us. So the first one I call rapid urbanization. Now, we've been moving into cities for centuries for the promise of a better life. But because of the huge populations in the world today, the pace and scale of urbanization today is massive. 1.6 million people move into cities every 10 days. By 2025, 5 billion people will live in cities. 2.5 billion of them in Asia. Now, as people move into cities, our cities get larger, we get more of them. By 2030, we'll have 41 megacities, cities of more than 10 million people or more, up from just 10 in 1990. But cities also drive economic growth. Thanks to urbanization, we'll welcome 1.8 billion new consumers to the world economy by 2025. So what does this mean? Well, it means new markets. How are we going to take advantage of these billions of new consumers coming online into the world economy over the next few years? As cities become more condensed and space becomes a premium, we're going to live in micro-housing more and more. We're going to be sharing office space more and more. How do you design products and services for these new environments? People living in cities actually expect to consume products in a different way. Think the sharing economy. Think how people want to work differently. Think the gig economy. Think everything as a service. How do you take advantage of these new business models? How do you deliver everything as a service in today's world? And last but not least, there is so much resources that are used building cities. If we don't change anything, by 2030 we'll need the resources of 2 entire planets to sustain our current lifestyle. And it's unlikely we're going to find another Earth within the next 15 years. So sustainability is not just something we should be doing, it's something that we have to be doing. Now, at the same time, of course, population demographics are changing around us. People are living longer, and in general and on average, people are having fewer babies. And this is actually leading to an aging population. We like to focus on millennials, but the reality is that by 2060, there'll be 3 billion more people in the world and over 30 than there are today. We'll have twice as many people over the age of 65, almost 1 billion. And so what does this mean? Obviously putting huge pressure on government services and healthcare. So you can expect digital health to remain big and booming, because this is something that with an aging population we just simply have to address. In most developed countries where populations are shrinking, we're actually going to have a shrinking and aging workforce. How are we going to deal with that? Productivity becomes even more important. And yet at the same time, we've got a new teenage population coming through, Gen Z. So for any of us who are employers here, this is a generation where 25% of Gen Z would rather give up their sense of smell than give up their digital device. So they have a completely different way of thinking about technology and what they expect at work. And of course, I like to think the rise of the silver spenders. That'll be me in a few years, maybe. This is a demographic that will have a lot of disposable income, and I think is completely underrepresented today in terms of product development and marketing. Thirdly, hyperglobalization. We all know the world is becoming more and more interconnected. I mean, it's giving rise to digital platforms and ecosystems, and that means startups, as we know, can scale faster than ever before. For big companies, that means that the competition isn't just other big companies now, it's new startups that are becoming instantly global. And pretty much this means that disruption is not something that just happens to somebody else anymore. It's something we all need to think about. It's happening to everyone, everywhere, even to those companies that were doing the disrupting themselves just a few short years ago. And as we have employees and customers and supply chain all across the globe, collaboration becomes critical, and as everything becomes connected, security becomes absolutely paramount as well. And I'd say last but not least, which is probably the big focus of this conference here and every conference these days, is innovation. I like to think of it as accelerated innovation. You know, we're constantly being bombarded by cheaper, faster, and more powerful technology. And you know what? It's really easy to forget that the reason things are changing so fast is because digital technology changes exponentially, it improves exponentially, versus our human brains, which pretty much just stay constant over time. And I think you're going to see 4 things happen here. No big revelations, but everything's becoming smarter. Machine learning and AI is being infused into everything. If the last 100 years were about electrification, at least the next 10 are going to be about cognification. Everything's going to get smarter. And as everything gets smarter, things become more and more automated. We're automating industries. Think transportation. Think manufacturing. Big topic today is we're automating our workforces as well. Because of factory automation, 85% of the jobs in China could be automated very soon. And there's some estimates that 47% of the jobs in the US, not just blue-collar jobs, but knowledge worker jobs, will be automated in the next 2 decades as well. Augmentation. Technology is changing what it means to be human. It's helping us be better, stronger, faster. The human biology actually is becoming the next big software platform. So we might all sit here and talk about mobile payment this year. Maybe next year we're talking about human augmentation and all of the weird new types of people that are out there, because We are becoming a software platform today with genetic engineering, with CRISPR and these other technologies. And we're all expecting everything to be personalized for us, not just digital products and content, but physical goods as well. This is changing manufacturing around the world too. So these are 4 big shifts I think innovation is driving. And just to sort of show you that this isn't something that's just happening in the future as well, here's a couple of examples of how startups and companies are already innovating to meet these demands. This micro-housing, okay? Pretty much you buy a house like this and it slots in a rack. Now if you want to move somewhere, hey, you just take your house out of the rack and move it to a different rack, and away you go. If you read the news, there's so many more innovations happening in micro-housing today, it's amazing. And I think this is something we all need to get used to, especially in big, dense cities. We talk about self-driving cars. I think I read something that in the US at least we spend 1 trillion hours a year on the roads driving. What do you think we're all going to be doing in the future where we don't have to be behind a steering wheel, right? Unfortunately, probably working. Well, already you're seeing concept cars that I think of as more roving rooms. You know, you want a cinema or an entertaining experience, call up an entertainment mobile room, a roving office, etc., etc. These are things we're starting to see as well. We're seeing brain-machine interfaces start to mature. Yeah, we've heard of neural lace and maybe that's around the corner, but there's already people who have lost use of their limbs and touch through accidents, regaining, not just being able to move their limbs, but be able to regain their sense of touch because of these machine and brain interfaces that are being developed. And the next one I want to show you, and I mentioned job automation earlier, is a quick video of an ad. And I'll let you guess which country. If you're familiar, you watch the ad and I'll let you guess where it was done. But it was conceived, produced, and created all by an artificial intelligence. No human touch involved. Here's the final product. So if any of you have ever spent time in Japan, you'll know that is a very effective ad. Dogs flying, sharp teeth, and lots of sprinkles of magic. So this actually was part of a competition. They competed against human creative directors. Now, the AI did not win this particular competition. Maybe many of you are breathing a sigh of relief about that. But it really won't be long before the movies that we're watching and the music that we're listening to as well are all created by AIs too. Now, I don't think that necessarily has to take anything away from what it means to be human, but we're going to start to see that more and more. And this one was fascinating to me. This is a worm, the C. elegans. It has, let's say, exactly 959 cells and 302 neurons. So what scientists did is they pretty much simulated this worm. They created a digital version of this worm. And they brought it to life. And I tell you, if that worm did not look like a real live worm, it was amazing. Now, yes, 302 neurons today, millions and trillions to go. But we're already seeing digital life start to come into the world as well. So with all of that, given us just short, I just want to leave you with a couple of thoughts. As we look at these mega trends and we think about the future, what I think is really important, whether you're a big company or a small company, is to really think about your mission, to define yourself in a way that you can change with the times without having to completely re-engineer your company. Think of Amazon. We heard yesterday that their mission is to be the most customer-centric company in the world. Nothing to do with bookstores, nothing to do with e-commerce anymore. Customer-centric. HP now defines itself as engineering experiences that amaze. We don't define ourselves by making PCs, printers, or 3D printers. We know the world is changing. We want to focus on that experience. Companies that do this well survive. Companies that don't. Keep tabs on megatrends. Understand what's happening in the world around us. Again, not just technology, but socioeconomic trends, demographic trends. Keep an eye on them. Refresh them every year. Keep an eye on the slides and the projector behind you when you're fiddling with the clicker. Keep tabs on startups. Startups are sort of the tip of the spear in the world today. They're on the edge of innovation. Stay fresh with what's going on. We have a tech ventures unit at HP. All we do is talk to startups each and every day, partner with them, invest in them, understand how they're viewing the world. Obviously, we all need to keep an open mind and be open to change. And if you're going to do something different, do it outside of your core business. It will not work. Everyone's heard of the innovator's dilemma. It's real, it's true. I've lived through it, experienced it many times. If you're going to try a new business model, make sure you do it independently of your existing core business so that it can act and behave like a startup as well. And finally, I would just say to all of us as we look at all of the disruption happening around us today, seriously, disrupt yourselves before somebody else does, because if you don't do it, they will. Thank you very much.